Hey y'all, welcome to the 18 Fingers channel. I decided I'm going to try to change this channel up a little bit and add some content to it and some tech articles and some racing and uh, try to make it a little more interesting than just a place that I've been dumping videos for 10 years. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Bill. Um, I am not a mechanic. I am not a welder. I am not a fabricator. I am not a tuner. I'm just a guy that messes with cars. I did go to school for auto mechanics when I got out of high school. Worked at a Pontiac dealer for a while. So I'm not new to turning wrenches, but that has not been my day job for quite some time. So I've been into cars for a long time. Um, had a car before I had a license. My first car was a 1963 Volkswagen, um, which I proceeded to cut up and make into a Baja Bug. um, After that, my parents thought they wanted me in something more substantial than a Volkswagen. So I sold the Volkswagen and they put a little money up, and I had my heart set on a 67 Firebird at the time, but my mom talked me into a 79 Duster, uh, the Aspen body style with a slant six. So it really wasn't what I wanted, but I kind of let my mom talk me into it. But we shortly after fixed that up. I drove it delivering pizzas, and took all the money I made delivering pizzas and took it to Pace Performance Center in Orlando and spent spent a lot of money there. Built a 360 with a tunnel ram, 727. One day I met a guy in there that had a Sebring he was parting out, and a 8 3/4 out of a Sebring bolted directly into the Aspen body. So I bought an 8 3/4 for it. So that was my high school car. Was a tunnel ram Dodge. Sold that car, bought a Trans Am. That was mostly stock, but that was the first car I ever went down the drag strip in. Went 1623 at 83 miles an hour, my first pass, Orlando Speedway. But what we really want to talk about is the more recent cars, the turbo stuff. So back in, I don't know, '07 or something like that, I bought a short bed Chevy truck, kind of rusty, ratty looking, but had a small block in it, intake carb, headers, small cam. Had a 12 bolt swap into it. So I was planning on just making a street truck out of that, and I drove around and didn't do much with it. And that became the first turbo car. So I stumbled upon a website called toohighpsi.com. I believe it's still there, and last time I looked at it, they had updated the website, but they still had kind of this vintage part of it where you could go see the website as it existed back then. And it was a guy that had built a T-Bird with a small block Ford in it, and he had built this homemade turbo system, and it was crazy. It was blow-through carbureted. The cold side was all made out of PVC pipe. It had a boost referenced mechanical fuel pump that he had boost referenced to the vent on the top of the fuel pump. Just some crazy stuff. But the car, one of my favorite quotes from that website was, he was at a car meet and somebody came up and said, "This piece of shit wouldn't run 13s." And he said, "Well, you're right, it's a piece of shit and it doesn't run 13s," because the car went like 1080s or something like that. So that was kind of the inspiration for me starting turbo stuff. So I went out and bought a bunch of stuff. I bought a turbo off of eBay, which turned out to be a 58 millimeter off a Volvo excavator. It was a T4i flange, so it wasn't even, it was the T4 International flange, so it didn't even have a normal T4 flange on it. But I home built a, I'll put some pictures in here of a crazy, it had long tube rear facing headers that I 90'd one header and 180'd the other and merged them together and put it back into the engine compartment, and that's what fed the turbo. And I did a home built blow through setup on it, and it had plumbing couplers for for the charge pipe, and it was, you know, a bunch of hacked up stuff. But my goal for the car was to go $12.99. I thought if I could build this street truck to go $12.99 with a bunch of garbage, you know, I'd be happy. So that was the first turbo setup. We took it out and it went 862 or something like that. I'll put the video in here.
$866, 682.78.
On its first pass, and I was pretty happy with that, because I mean that would have been like a mid-13 second pass. I always do the math between the 8th mile, even though I've been up here for 20 years or so in North Carolina, but I came from Orlando and I came from a quarter-mile track, so I still kind of do the mental math between 8th mile and quarter-mile. So if you see me doing that in these videos, that's why, because I still set goals and stuff based on quarter-mile times, even though we mostly run 8th. So anyway, it went 860s, which would have been mid-13s, and I was pretty happy with that. And after a little tweaking and a little tuning, it ended up going 790s. It went 1260s. To the quarter, and then ended up hurting that motor. It had a homemade meth injection system on it, and I thought it was killing power, so I turned it off for a quarter-mile pass, and ended up hurting the motor on pump gas, and it pulled the ring lands off a couple pistons, but when I got it apart, it had broken the block too. So that's when it became an LS swap. I had a hard time finding, I had some pistons and stuff. I was going to go ahead and build the 350 that was in it, because I already had some forged pistons around that were 30 over, but I couldn't find a decent block. So, you know, in the meantime, you could go to a junkyard and trip over 5 LS motors. So I ended up selling all the blow-through stuff and all the stuff I have for the small block intake and the headers and everything, and went to Martin's Auto Salvage here in Raleigh and bought a 5.3 off the shelf. They had a bunch of them already pulled and sitting on crates. Intake to oil pan, I paid $500 for it. They put it in the car with a 90-day warranty, and they loaded it in the back of the truck, and I took it home, and we started on the LS stuff. So I swapped at the time I also bought a bigger turbo, also another diesel truck turbo. It's a TV 7512, which is like a 75.5 millimeter. I always call it a 76, but some people call it a 75, whatever. But it's a diesel truck turbo. It's off a Detroit diesel. So stock intake, and I did some stupid stuff with that and put in 60-pound injectors, and you know, took a death wheel to the intake manifold to cut the manifold down to fit the 60-pound injectors, and it was powered by a micro squirt, and it had a 044 fuel pump, you know, flip manifolds, just kind of the same old stuff that everybody was doing at the time. This was back in 2012, 2013 area. And had an LS9 cam, bought that cam for $98 at the GM dealer. And I started out with a set of blue GM valve springs in it, and took that to the track, and the first pass it went like 780s. And I thought, well, I was a little disappointed. I thought it would be quicker than that. I was trying to go like 760s, which isn't a big jump, but at the time, again, I had set goals for the truck to go 1199 to the quarter, and you know, 780s wouldn't get you there. You know, it would be like 760s would get you to the 1190s. So I was a little disappointed, but I came home and I looked through the logs and I realized that it was pulling a bunch of timing when I let go. It didn't have a trans brake, but it had a two-step button on it. So I used to foot brake it with one foot and hit the button with the other and let go of the button and the brake at the same time. But when I let go of the button, it would pull a bunch of timing out and then added it back in, and then would pull it back out, and it was doing some stupid stuff with the timing because I was doing the tuning. But once I realized what was going on there, I added some timing on the hit, and like 2 weeks later took it out to Dragon Rights, which was a local, the HorsepowerJunkies.com, that was a local forum for North Carolina folks, and they used to do these semi-annual get-togethers, and you know, they were a lot of fun. But I took it out to Dragon Rights like 2 weeks later, and first hit off the trailer, it went 717. I was jumping up and down. We went from 780s to 17s with one batch of tuning in it, you know. So I did end up fighting that thing for a long time, for like over a season. That it developed a miss at high RPM, not at high RPM, at high speed, and I couldn't get rid of it. I tried valve springs, I tried putting a second fuel pump, I tried gapping plugs, I tried everything, thinking it was blowing out the spark, thinking it was floating the valves. Everything I tried didn't fix it. I later ended up fixing it and found out that it was a bad weather pack connector at the crank sensor. And what was happening is that at high speed, the wind would start blowing it, and that weather pack connector would wiggle and cut out. So it wouldn't cut the motor off, but it would give you just enough disconnect there to, make you crazy. So anyway, we figured that out. The truck ended up going 680s at 102, basically on the same setup, same boost. It was on 15 pounds or so. And it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with that truck. I still have it. It's sitting out in the driveway with no engine in it now. But after I ended up hurting the motor in that too, that it bent some connecting rods, and I totally blame that on pump gas. It was a pump gas setup, and I hadn't touched the tune-up in 3 or 4 track outings, and so it had loads of passes on that same exact tune-up with no problems. And then we put a new batch of gas in it, took it out to the track, and bang, bent 3 rods in it. So it sat out here over the winter, and in the meantime, we ended up with this Mustang. My good friend Ron, who you probably see on this channel moving forward, he came up with this Mustang. He had bought a motorcycle in pieces and put it together and traded it to this guy for the Mustang. And I had the trailer, and he calls me one day and says, "Hey man, can you help me? Let's go get this Mustang. Can we take your trailer?" Guy says it has no brakes. So we go out there, put the motorcycle on it, go out there. He's got somebody there to do the title work and stuff, and so Ron traded him straight up the Mustang for the motorcycle. We brought the Mustang home, and it sat in my driveway for almost a year because the truck was down, so the truck was off the trailer. It sat on the trailer, it sat through snow and everything else. And in the spring, I said to Ron, I'm going to take the motor out of the truck and put it in the Mustang. I said, let's work something out, and I want to buy the Mustang. So we worked out a deal where I did some work for him, and the deal is that we would sell the engine and trans, and whatever we got from that, he would get that. And so I ended up, he signed the title over, and I, built something for him, and we ended up selling the engine and trans for what he had in the motorcycle. So basically the car was free. But Ron decided that he was going to be in on the car, so he put the other $1,200 back into the car. So we're kind of partners in the car. That Ron puts the money into it, and I do most of the tuning and driving and that type of stuff. And we're kind of Oscar and Felix, where I always want to do the quick, dirty way, and Ron wants to throw money at it and make it look pretty. So anywho, that's how I ended up with the Mustang. And so we took everything out of the truck, all the fuel system, the pump, all the micro squirt, the flip manifolds, the same intercooler, same turbo, same everything. Put it in the Mustang. We bought a Gen 4 bottom end. Ron came up with that from somebody of his somewhere. Untouched. It's not been apart, not ring gap, not rod bolts, no nothing. It is as GM built it. So we put that on. We put the 862 heads, which came off the truck motor that I originally bought, untouched. Everything in it was stock, the same LS9 cam, the old 170,000 mile timing chain. We put it all in the Mustang, and that's the car we got today.